Mr. Speaker, I am a very lucky woman. I have been fortunate to have grown up in the province of New Brunswick, a beautiful province of hills and valleys. I've had the great honour of living in the mighty Miramichi. I've had the honour of living in Kings County in Sussex. I've spent 5 years here in Fredericton as a student, and for the last 50 years I've enjoyed living in Carleton County. I've lived on the rivers of Miramichi, St. John, Kennebecasis, and I feel that I've got a really good sense of what New Brunswick's all about. When I was minister, I had the joy of going to Tracadie and the northern ridings to visit with stakeholders there. I've visited many farms and fisheries around this province, and it is a glorious place in which we live. But I think I'm most fortunate to be spending the time where I've raised my family, and that is in Carleton County, and specifically Carleton, Victoria. And that's what I'd like to speak to today in my response to the speech from the throne. It's always an honour to rise in this House on behalf of the people of Carleton, Victoria, some of the hardest working, kindest people you'll ever meet. They are people who love their communities, who care about their province, and who want to see the province move forward, but they also expect honesty, fairness, and action, not just nice words. So I've listened very closely to this year's speech from the throne. It's talked about change, about progress, and about addressing the challenges that people across New Brunswick are facing. Things like health care, affordability, housing, and education. These are the right areas to focus on, no question about it, but I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that what folks back home keep telling me is this: they are tired of promises that never seem to reach past Fredericton, Moncton, or St. John. So let's start with health care, because that's the #1 issue in Carleton, Victoria, and I suspect in just about every other riding represented here. The government's plan talks about more collaborative clinics, about getting 81% of New Brunswickers attached to a doctor or a nurse practitioner, and that's a good goal. But, Mr. Speaker, we don't need more goals. We need a doctor. 40 years ago, we were fortunate to have many young men and women graduating from medical school and coming to the River Valley. Tobic Health Centre was a bustling small hospital where you could go and have your baby, see a doctor in a day's notice, and never fear if there was going to be an accident at the mill, because there were going to be physicians and nurses and staff there to answer the call. Then Hotel Dieu Saint-Joseph, even 20 years ago, was a facility where you could have a hernia repair or even an appendectomy. And yes, you could have your baby delivered right there. In Bath, you could have a cast put on. Your croupy child could be treated with a mist tent. And guess what? You could have a baby there too. Now, I'm going to use the royal we to say that we've shown little or no foresight since those days. The lack of planning for continual recruitment, replacement, and investment in new physicians has now left us in a situation where we have been forced to centralize, reduce services, and tell nearly 8,000 people that there is no primary physician for them, and no, you cannot have your baby here. You may have to go as far as Fredericton. There are people in Bath, Florenceville, Perth Andover, and rural areas beyond who've been waiting years for a family physician. Some have to drive to Woodstock or to Edmundston for basic care. And if you need a specialist, well, you're driving to St. John or Moncton if you can get in at all. So while I appreciate the government recognizing the problem, I'd like to see a concrete plan, one that actually brings healthcare professionals to rural areas and keeps them there. So that means better incentives, housing supports, and community-based clinics, not just more promises of studies on more pilot projects. The lack of physicians and nurses is not a New Brunswick problem, nor is it a Canadian problem. It is a global concern, and international recruitment safari is only part of the answer. A grown here at home with the help of Canadian universities and college physicians must be part of the equation. We must examine the system our people work in, and we must get to the root of why it is that 62 out of 100 nurses graduating do not stay in our province. We must have a rural care guarantee for primary care, a clear, funded, rural primary care guarantee that ensures every resident in Carleton, Victoria has access to a doctor or a nurse practitioner within X days or within Y kilometers. That guarantee must include incentives for providers to locate it to rural areas, relocation funding and retention strategies where we can fill in those blanks. So how about within 7 days or 50 kilometres? Or is that too ambitious for a government whose rural plan seems to be based on thoughts and prayers? Now let's talk about some housing issues. Mr. Speaker, the people in my riding are struggling to make ends meet. The cost of groceries, fuel, heating oil, it's all through the roof. And for young families, the dream of owning a home feels further away than ever. Ah, the Canadian dream. A cozy home where you don't have to get a second mortgage to cover your heating bill. In rural New Brunswick, it's more like a pipe dream with leaky pipes. Now, the government says it wants 6,000 new homes built every year, and that sounds impressive. But let's be honest, not many of those homes are going up in places like Bath or Perth Andover. In rural communities, we're facing a different challenge. We've got older homes that need fixing, seniors who can't afford renovations to stay in their own homes and age in place, and rental shortages for young workers who want to stay local. NB Housing is advising clients of long wait lists of 2 to 5 years. And I just want you to think, just imagine what it's like talking to a single mom with 5 children who's just been told that. How frustrating it must be to drive by homes that are standing empty, but they can't settle in them because there's a backlog of properties awaiting repairs. And it's very interesting, when I read the throne speech, that the direct-to-tenant benefit is so highly touted in the throne speech, as that program has in fact been paused due to a lack of funding. Apparently, there wasn't sufficient understanding of the affordable housing crisis to predict the significant uptake that it's experienced. So what we need are programs that focus on rural housing, repairs, conversions, affordable rental units, not just big development incentives for urban centres. And while we're at it, let's make sure small contractors, local tradespeople have the support and training to do that work. Beyond building new homes, we need programs to repair and retrofit existing homes, adapt homes for seniors aging in place, and support rentals for young families and attract new residents to rural towns. Carleton, Victoria needs to revitalize rural housing stream. Now, when we speak about the economy, the throne speech talks about productivity, innovation, and growing our economy. Now, that's great, but I'd like to see the same attention given to our traditional industries like forestry, farming, and small business. Innovation is great, but in Carleton County, we're innovating ways to survive tariffs, not launching startups from our barns. Now, in Carleton, Victoria, our forestry sector is the backbone of the local economy. It provides jobs, supports families, and sustains entire towns. Yet the speech was silent on how we're going to strengthen that sector, how we'll invest in value-added processing, how we're going to protect woodlot owners or encourage young people to see forestry as a viable career. The very real threat that tariffs have brought to organizations like the Carleton Victoria Wood Producers, Crab Lumber, and Groupe Lebel has administrators undergoing major restructuring. It has challenged them to rethink the way they do business, change working hours, and it has their employees praying that they will be able to survive the changes. Tariffs hitting forestry, there's a shocker. It's like the U.S. decided to tax our trees for being too polite. Meanwhile, employees are rethinking their careers into something less wooden, like unemployment lines. And farmers, Mr. Speaker, they've been through some tough years. Rising input costs, unpredictable weather, and tight margins. They don't need more red tape. They need clear support, reliable programs, and a government that understands agriculture isn't a side issue. It is central to our province's future. Now, I believe that I've mentioned once before that a reporter once told me when I was Minister for DAAF that if I'd had a more important portfolio, I'd get more attention. Well, forgive me, Mr. Speaker, but representing and advocating for the people who put food on the tables of the people of New Brunswick is one of the greatest honours I could have had. And I didn't do it for the attention that I would receive, but to be sure that the sector got the attention that it so richly deserves. And let's also remember our small businesses, the folks who run the corner stores, the family restaurants, the garages. They are the heart of rural life. And many are still recovering from the pandemic, facing high borrowing costs. We need real small business tax relief, not just talking points. The crippling effects of policies like the CCA will be felt by the rural convenience store owners and small-town gas stations. The government's economic development strategy must explicitly include forest industry transition, value-added processing, agri-food, tourism, corresponding to Carleton Victoria's strengths. The speech mentions productivity and private sector competitiveness, but we need a rural dimension, training for local trades, exploiting natural resource value chains, improving digital access so home-based businesses are viable. Maybe it would be more palatable if, rather than calling it exploiting, we called it lovingly harvested, because it sounds less villainous. Now, I can't talk about Carleton Victoria without mentioning infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. There are still areas in my riding where you cannot get a decent cell signal and where the roads are so patched and pitted that people wonder if anyone in Fredericton remembers they even exist. If this government wants to talk about change in motion, let's start with cell service that works, roads that are safe, and broadband that lets kids do their homework without sitting in a parking lot to find Wi-Fi. There must be infrastructure investment with rural weighting. When the government says upgrade 3 cell towers or improve outdoor air quality, those actions must be weighted so that rural areas like Carleton Victoria get equitable shares. Infrastructure dollars must not be captured entirely by urban centres. We call for a rural infrastructure fund embedded in the economic development strategy. And I applaud the recent announcements for the North and Easterners, part of the province that has been unserviced. But the Minister of DTI, Petal, and our own Speaker of the House know just how desperately the Western Corridor needs the infusion of service. Maybe ONB can explore investment in carrier pigeons. Time after time, the big 3 telecommunications companies respond with New Brunswick, and other maritime provinces as well, does not represent an adequate economic benefit to the company. If this is the case, then let's explore a Made in the Maritimes option. In today's tech-rooted world, for education, for business, for finance, and even health, connectivity is critical. Lack thereof leaves New Brunswick lagging behind other provinces, which impacts our economic and societal growth. Under education and childcare, I was glad to see mention of childcare expansion to 3,600 new designated spaces by next March. That's ambitious, and I'll give credit where credit is due, but I'll say this: rural New Brunswick needs to see its share. Too often, those spaces end up concentrated in bigger cities, leaving small communities scrambling. And now I'm going to advocate for other communities around the province, and that's because I'm pleased to say that thanks to the efforts of the previous government, combined with the support of the current government, Bath will soon be pleased to open a new early learning centre with the Margaret Keenan Early Childhood Centre. And with the necessity of more and more families needing both parents working to make ends meet, it is essential that these centres of excellence provide a sound foundation for our youngest citizens, where they can be secure, happy, healthy, and stimulated. Now, I have to examine the recent cuts to administrative assistants and library assistants. In ASDW, 70 employees have been affected: 33 library workers, 19 education assistants, 10 administrative assistants are going to be eliminated, bringing a cost savings of $621,460 to the district. cuts for savings, that's brilliant. Because who needs libraries anyway? I mean, kids can Google everything. Oh, but wait, that's right, we don't have Wi-Fi in rural areas. So once again, the ramifications on rural communities is felt deeply. Rural and small community schools, such as many in Carleton, Victoria, library workers do more than just shelve books. They help students access reading material, they guide research, they support literacy development, they provide a supervised quiet space for study. And as one worker put it, it is going to be detrimental because library workers do much more than shelve books. They assist kids with learning and finding books, and sometimes they are a quiet place to find solace from a far too busy day. Administrative assistants likewise provide essential support to teachers, managing paperwork, helping with communication, relaying information, ensuring operations run smoothly in the front office. Cutting these roles removes vital infrastructure from the school day and places the administrative burden back on the desks of already stretched principals, vice principals, and teachers. The government asserts that the library administrative assistant roles are not instructional, or they don't directly impact student learning, as stated by a direct email. This ignores the reality of how schools function, especially in more remote or rural communities. So the argument that literacy and numeracy supports need to be closer to the classroom does not justify removing the supporting roles that facilitate those classroom activities. In smaller and rural schools, resources are already limited. A library worker might also serve at multiple grades, managing book collections, support teacher-led research, and act as a literacy champion. Without that person, schools risk losing a key service and support mechanism. We must also consider our recruitment and retention issues in our teaching ranks. The NBTA just released the following, and I quote, "Retention and recruitment is the #1 priority." Teachers, however, struggle to believe that it is a priority for this government. Currently, more than 180 classrooms are being led by community members. Even more frightening, more than 1,300 teachers and 157 administrators will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. Carleton, Victoria constituents will see this as a real-world hit. Fewer supports in the school building, increased burdens on teachers and principals, less student choice and layered support. Teachers and their union are asking for additional time and resources, prioritize certified professionals, promoting respect for the profession, and valuing the underlying indicators of student success. So moving forward, I would ask that we consider the following: a moratorium on any further layoffs of library workers and school administrative assistants until a full review is conducted of the impact on students, schools, and rural districts. A transparent breakdown of the redirected funds. How much is the new money? How much is reallocation? And how much is the net reduction in frontline sports? We must also ensure that savings are first found at the administrative district level, where overload may be higher, rather than inside the school building, where supports for students are directly affected. We must enhance recognition of library and administrative roles as essential, not optional, especially in rural school settings. Engagement with stakeholders, teachers' unions, support staff unions such as CUPE, and school boards to develop a strategy that balances fiscal responsibility with educational quality. And working together, we can assure our teachers that they are supported, our parents that there is a consistent delivery of quality education, and our students that they are receiving an optimal educational experience. The throne speech also talked about trusted leadership, and I think that's something everyone here in the House can get behind, because trust in government is built on action, not announcements. When people see hospitals closing, when people see hospitals closing emergency rooms, schools struggling to find staff, and seniors waiting for care, they start to lose faith that the government is listening. If this government really wants to restore trust, it should start by being open with the public. Be honest about what's working and what's not. Publish the data. Admit when goals aren't being met, and then explain why. That's how you build credibility. Changing the rules midstream, backpedaling on programs that were starting to give people hope, only magnifies fatigue and creates angst. Mr. Speaker, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. What works in Fredericton or Moncton doesn't always work in Carleton, Victoria. We need a rural lens applied to every major government policy, whether it be health care, housing, education, transportation, you name it. Rural people pay taxes too, and they deserve fair access to services. And we're not asking for special treatment, just fairness. When new clinics are being built, make sure rural areas get some. When housing programs roll out, make sure rural communities qualify. When infrastructure funds are distributed, don't let all the money stop at city limits. Every target must be accompanied by public dashboards and annual rural community breakdowns. We in opposition will insist on regular reports. For example, how many collaborative clinics have opened in rural New Brunswick? How many childcare spaces were created in Carleton, Victoria? How many new houses were started? How many cell towers were upgraded? We need to have that information made public. So where do we go from here? I'm not here to tear everything down. I believe there's room for cooperation and for common sense. I would like nothing more than to hear a policy or proposal and think, wow, that's a great idea. And I've said this before, what's a good idea is a good idea. That's what the people of New Brunswick need. Projects like nursing homes without walls, conservation of 100,000 hectares of woodland with the launch of the Nature Legacy, the introduction of spike protection on rent, the signing of a sustained agricultural partnership with our federal partners, which brought $8.5 million to strengthen agricultural innovation and resilience, the declaration of gender-based violence as an epidemic, and the unanimous consent on radon testing. These were all great ideas, and several of them received unanimous consent. But if the government is serious about delivering results, the opposition would be happy to support measures that genuinely make life better for New Brunswickers. But we will also hold them to account, because the people of Carleton, Victoria, and the people across this province deserve more than words. They deserve results. So, as the speech indicated, possible legislation to amend the Public Health Act and introduce pay transparency by 2026, the government must bring concrete bills this session, and the opposition will scrutinize them closely. The people of Carleton, Victoria will judge us on results, not just promises. A mid-year State of New Brunswick Progress report should be tabled, with indicators by riding. And if the government is serious about trusted leadership, then accountability must also follow. So, Mr. Speaker, the people I represent are resilient. They have weathered storms, fires, floods, and economic uncertainty. They don't expect miracles, just fairness, honesty, and a government that remembers them. And when they hear a throne speech filled with promises, they're hopeful. But they've also learned to wait and see. So my message to this government is simple. Don't let them down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.